The Manson family murders. In the late summer of 1969, Los Angeles shimmered under a haze of glamour and dread. The city was a kaleidoscope of Hollywood dreams, where starlets and moguls mingled in sun-drenched mansions, and the counterculture pulsed through the streets, fueled by free love, drugs, and rebellion. The 1960s were a time of upheaval, a decade where the promise of peace and love clashed with the shadows of war and unrest. Amid this cultural maelstrom, a sinister force was coalescing, one that would tear through the city's veneer of glitz and leave a scar on the American psyche. At its center was a man named Charles Manson, a diminutive, wild-eyed drifter whose charisma cloaked a malevolent genius. His name would become synonymous with horror, his followers a chilling testament to the power of manipulation, and their crimes a blood-soaked requiem for the end of an era. Charles Manson was no ordinary criminal. Born in 1934 in Cincinnati, Ohio, his life was a tapestry of abandonment and delinquency. A child of a broken home, Manson spent his youth shuttling between reform schools and prisons, honing a cunning intellect and a knack for bending others to his will. By the time he arrived in San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury district in 1967, fresh from a stint in federal prison, he was a 32-year-old ex-con with a magnetic presence. Standing just 5 feet 2 inches, with a mop of dark hair and piercing eyes that seemed to peer into the soul, Manson was a chameleon, part mystic, part conman, part musician. He strummed a guitar, spouted apocalyptic prophecies, and drew in the lost, the disillusioned, and the searching. To them, he was a guru, a savior who promised liberation from a corrupt society. To history, he would become a monster. Manson's followers, known as the Manson family, were a motley crew of young drifters, many of them women, who had been swept up in the counterculture's tide. They were children of the 1960s, rebelling against the establishment, seeking meaning in a world that felt increasingly unmoored. Susan Atkins, a 21-year-old former topless dancer from San Francisco, was one of the first to fall under Manson's spell. Her dark beauty and reckless abandon made her a devoted disciple, willing to do anything for her leader. Patricia Krenwinkel, a 19-year-old secretary, abandoned her life after meeting Manson at a party, captivated by his promises of love and purpose. Leslie Van Houten, a former homecoming princess turned runaway, joined at 19, her innocence warped by drugs and Manson's influence. Charles Tex Watson, a lanky Texan with a boyish charm, became Manson's right-hand man, his loyalty cemented by a shared hunger for chaos. Linda Kasabian, a 20-year-old mother searching for belonging, was drawn in just weeks before the murders. These were not hardened criminals, but impressionable youths, their minds pliable under Manson's relentless manipulation. They called him Charlie, their prophet, their god, their devil. The Manson family settled at Spahn Ranch, a dilapidated movie set in the arid hills of Chatsworth, California. Once a backdrop for Western films, the ranch was now a decaying relic, its dusty trails and sagging barns a perfect hideout for Manson's commune. Here, under the relentless California sun, the family lived a strange, communal existence. They scavenged for food, indulged in LSD-fueled orgies, and listened raptly as Manson preached his twisted gospel. The 1960s counterculture, with its rejection of authority and embrace of alternative lifestyles, provided fertile ground for Manson's machinations. He preyed on the era's idealism, twisting its rhetoric of freedom into a doctrine of destruction. The family saw themselves as revolutionaries, harbingers of a new world order, but their utopia was a nightmare in waiting. Manson's philosophy was a fever dream of paranoia and apocalypse, rooted in his obsession with the Beatles' White Album. He believed the record contained coded messages, particularly in the song Helter Skelter, which he interpreted as a prophecy of an impending race war. Manson told his followers that Helter Skelter was coming, a cataclysmic uprising where African Americans would rise against whites, plunging the world into chaos. In his delusional vision, the Manson family would hide in a mythical bottomless pit in Death Valley, emerging to rule the survivors. But Manson's motives were not purely ideological. His musical ambitions had crumbled. Rejections from producers like Terry Melcher, who once lived at 10050 Cielo Drive, stung his ego. Some speculate his murders were a twisted bid for revenge, a way to strike at Hollywood's elite. Others believe he sought to implicate his followers in heinous crimes to bind them to him, ensuring their silence. Whatever the truth, Manson's motives were a toxic blend of megalomania, resentment, and apocalyptic fervor, a cocktail that would soon ignite a firestorm of violence. The Los Angeles of 1969 was a city of contrasts. Hollywood's glittering facade masked a darker reality. Drugs flowed freely, and the counterculture's promise of peace was fraying. The Vietnam War loomed large, its shadow fueling protests and distrust. Manson exploited this unrest, positioning himself as a messiah for the disaffected. His family, cloaked in the trappings of hippie culture, beads, bare feet, and communal living, were a grotesque parody of the era's ideals. They were not flower children but wolves in tie-dye, their devotion to Manson a chilling reminder of how charisma can twist devotion into depravity. The stage was set for a tragedy that would shock the world, a series of murders so brutal they would shatter the illusion of the summer of love. As the sun set on August 8, 1969, the city was unaware of the horror about to unfold. At 10:50 Cielo Drive, a secluded mansion in Benedict Canyon, actress Sharon Tate, 8.5 months pregnant, entertained friends in her husband Roman Polanski's absence. The house, once home to Terry Melcher, was a symbol of Hollywood success, its glass walls reflecting the city's sparkle. But beyond the city lights, in the desolate expanse of Spahn Ranch, Manson was plotting. His followers, armed with knives and a .22 caliber revolver, were ready to obey his every command. The counterculture's dream of utopia was about to collide with a nightmare of blood and terror, and Los Angeles would never be the same. What made Manson's family so terrifying was not just their actions, but their ordinariness. These were not monsters in the traditional sense, no fangs, no claws, just young people who might have been your neighbors, your classmates, your friends. Yet under Manson's sway, they became instruments of unimaginable cruelty. The 1960s, with its promise of liberation, had birthed a paradox, a cult that preached love but practiced slaughter. As the family prepared to unleash their horror, the city slept, oblivious to the darkness creeping closer. The Manson family murders were not just crimes. They were a betrayal of an era's hopes, a chilling warning that even in the age of Aquarius, evil could wear a human face. The night of August 8, 1969, hung heavy over Los Angeles, the air thick with the scent of jasmine and the distant hum of a city that never slept. In the secluded hills of Benedict Canyon, the mansion at 10:50 Cielo Drive glowed like a jewel against the velvet dark. Inside, Sharon Tate, a radiant 26-year-old actress with golden hair and a smile that lit up Hollywood, reclined on a plush sofa, her pregnant belly a soft curve beneath her flowing dress. At 8.5 months, she was the picture of expectant joy, her beauty immortalized in films like Valley of the Dolls. Her husband, director Roman Polanski, was away in London, leaving Sharon to host a small gathering of friends. The scene was idyllic. Wine glasses clinked, laughter spilled through open windows, and the warm California night seemed to promise nothing but serenity. But beyond the city's glitter, in the desolate sprawl of Spahn Ranch, a darker force was stirring. Charles Manson, the Pied Piper of chaos, had set his plan in motion, and his followers were already weaving through the night, their eyes glinting with a terrifying purpose. The Manson family's convoy, a battered car filled with Charles, Tex, Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian, slipped through the winding roads of Los Angeles like specters. Armed with knives, a .22 caliber revolver, and Manson's apocalyptic orders, they were no longer the lost hippies of the counterculture. They were soldiers in a twisted crusade, their minds warped by drugs and devotion. Manson had told them to go to Cielo Drive, to the house once occupied by Terry Melcher, the music producer who had rejected his dreams of stardom. "Make it messy," he'd whispered, his voice a venomous caress. "Leave a sign, something witchy." The family understood. This was to be the opening salvo of Helter Skelter, the race war Manson believed would reshape the world. As their car crept up the steep driveway, the mansion's lights flickered like a beacon, unaware of the horror about to descend. Render_generated_image_description equals a dark, moonlit view of a secluded Hollywood mansion at night, its glass windows glowing warmly against the shadowy hills of Benedict Canyon. The scene is eerie, with twisted trees and a faint mist curling around the edges, hinting at an impending sense of doom. Size equals medium, position equals center /. The first to fall was Stephen Parrott, an 18-year-old visitor leaving the estate after meeting with the caretaker. As he drove down the driveway, Tex Watson emerged from the shadows, his lanky frame a silhouette against the headlights. "Please, don't hurt me," Stephen begged, his voice cracking with terror. But Watson's eyes were cold, his smile a cruel slash. The revolver barked 4 times, and Stephen slumped over the wheel, blood pooling in the darkness. The family cut the phone lines, their knives glinting as they scaled the fence and slipped into the estate like wraiths. Inside, the party continued, oblivious to the predators circling closer. Sharon Tate sat with Jay Sebring, a 35-year-old celebrity hairstylist, and her former lover, now a close friend. His dark good looks and easy charm made him a Hollywood fixture. Nearby, Wojciech Frykowski, a Polish writer and Polanski's friend, lounged with Abigail Folger, the 25-year-old coffee heiress whose quiet intelligence belied her wealth. The 4 laughed and talked, their voices a soft melody against the night. But the melody shattered when Tex Watson burst through the front door, his gun raised, his face a mask of manic glee. "I'm the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's business," he roared, his voice echoing through the mansion. Susan Atkins and Patricia Krenwinkel followed, their eyes wild with adrenaline and LSD, knives clutched in trembling hands. Linda Kasabian, the newest recruit, hesitated at the door, her heart pounding as the nightmare unfolded. Render_generated_image_description equals a chaotic scene inside a luxurious 1960s Hollywood mansion, with shattered glass, overturned furniture, and bloodstains splattered across a white carpet. The lighting is dim, with flickering lamps casting long shadows, creating a sense of frantic terror. Size equals medium, position equals center /. The scene erupted into chaos. Wojciech Frykowski lunged at Watson, only to be pistol-whipped and shot twice, his body crumpling to the floor. Abigail Folger screamed, bolting for the door, but Susan Atkins tackled her, her knife flashing. "Stop running, or I'll kill you," Atkins hissed, her voice dripping with sadistic glee. Jay Sebring tried to protect Sharon, pleading for her unborn child's life, but Watson's rage was unstoppable. He shot Sebring, then stabbed him repeatedly, blood spraying across the pristine walls. Sharon, her face pale with terror, begged for mercy, clutching her swollen belly. "Please, let me live for my baby," she sobbed. But the family's eyes were empty, their humanity stripped away by Manson's spell. Atkins and Krenwinkel descended on her, their knives plunging again and again. Sharon's screams faded into a gurgling silence as the room became a slaughterhouse, blood pooling on the floor, smeared across the furniture, and dripping from the walls. The carnage was relentless. Frykowski, still alive, staggered onto the lawn, his face a mask of blood. Watson pursued him, stabbing and shooting until he lay still, the grass stained crimson. Abigail Folger made it to the garden, her white nightgown torn, but Krenwinkel caught her, slashing wildly. "I'm already dead," Abigail whispered, collapsing as her life drained away. Inside, Sharon Tate lay lifeless, her beauty marred by 16 stab wounds, a rope tied around her neck and looped over a beam, her body dangling in a grotesque tableau. Atkins dipped her fingers in Sharon's blood, scrawling "pig" on the front door, a witchy sign meant to shock and terrify. The killers laughed, their voices high and unhinged, as they fled into the night, leaving a scene of unimaginable horror. Render_searched_image_description equals a blood-smeared crime scene in a 1960s Hollywood mansion with forensic markers and police tape, capturing the gruesome aftermath of a violent murder. Size equals small, position equals right /. The next night, August 9th, 1969, the family struck again, their bloodlust unquenched. Manson, displeased with the messiness of the Tate murders, joined them this time, leading Watson, Atkins, Krenwinkel, Leslie Van Houten, and Steve Grogan to 3301 Waverly Drive in Los Feliz. The target was Leno LaBianca, a 44-year-old supermarket executive, and his wife, Rosemary, 38, a dress shop owner. The couple was asleep in their modest home, unaware of the intruders slipping through their unlocked door. Manson crept into their bedroom, his small frame a shadow in the moonlight, and tied them up with a chilling calm. "Don't worry," he purred, his voice a sickening lullaby. "We're just here to rob you." But as he left, he whispered to his followers, "Do something witchy." The LaBianca murders were a study in calculated cruelty. Watson stabbed Leno repeatedly, carving war into his stomach with a bayonet, the letters jagged and deep. A fork was left protruding from his abdomen, a grotesque mockery of domesticity. Rosemary fought desperately, her screams muffled as Krenwinkel and Van Houten stabbed her 41 times, her blood soaking the bed. The killers scrawled "Death to Pigs" and "Rise" on the walls in Leno's blood, and "Helter Skelter" sick on the refrigerator, a misspelled nod to Manson's apocalyptic vision. The scene was a macabre masterpiece, designed to incite panic and confusion, a message to the world that Helter Skelter had begun. Render_generated_image_description equals a dimly lit suburban bedroom in 1960s Los Angeles, with bloodstained walls scrawled with eerie messages like "Death to Pigs" and a fork protruding from a victim's body, evoking a chilling sense of calculated horror. The city awoke to a nightmare. On August 9th, a housekeeper discovered the Tate crime scene, her screams echoing through Benedict Canyon. Police arrived to a house of horrors, bodies sprawled across the lawn and living room, blood painting every surface, the air thick with the coppery stench of death. Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, Wojciech Frykowski, Abigail Folger, and Stephen Parent lay dead, their lives snuffed out in a frenzy of violence. The next day, a neighbor found the LaBiancas, their home transformed into a slaughterhouse. Los Angeles reeled, its glamorous facade shattered. Headlines screamed of ritualistic murders, and fear gripped the city. Locks were changed, guns were bought, and the summer of love felt like a distant dream. Who could commit such atrocities? And why? The crime scenes were chaos incarnate, a deliberate assault on order. The Tate Mansion, once a symbol of Hollywood excess, was now a gallery of gore, with furniture overturned, bloodstains splattered like abstract art, and that chilling word "pig" glaring from the door. The LaBianca home, a quiet suburban retreat, was defiled with messages that seemed to mock the very idea of safety. The randomness of the victims, Hollywood elite and middle-class grocers alike, sent a message: no one was safe. The killers had vanished, leaving only blood and questions. The city held its breath, waiting for the next strike, as the Manson family retreated to Spahn Ranch, their laughter echoing in the desert night, their hands still stained with the blood of innocence. The tension in Los Angeles reached a fever pitch. Rumors swirled of satanic cults, drug deals gone wrong, and Hollywood conspiracies. The police were baffled, their leads thin, the crime scenes too chaotic to yield clear clues. But the family's work was not done. Manson, intoxicated by the carnage, believed he was orchestrating the end of the world. His followers, bound by fear and fanaticism, were ready to kill again. The city's pulse quickened, its streets alive with paranoia, as the shadow of Helter Skelter loomed larger. Yet, in the quiet corners of Spahn Ranch, the first cracks in Manson's control were forming, as Linda Kasabian's conscience began to stir, a faint spark of humanity in the darkness. Los Angeles, August 1969, was a city under siege, not by an army, but by fear. The Tate LaBianca murders had left the city raw, its glittering facade cracked by the savagery at 10050 Cielo Drive and 3301 Waverly Drive. Blood-soaked walls, cryptic messages scrawled in crimson, and the lifeless bodies of Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, Wojciech Frykowski, Abigail Folger, Stephen Parent, Leno LaBianca, and Rosemary LaBianca haunted the headlines. The Los Angeles Police Department, LAPD, stood at the edge of a nightmare, grasping at shadows as the public demanded answers. Who could commit such atrocities? Why? The city's pulse raced, its streets alive with whispered conspiracies, satanic cults, drug-fueled vendettas, Hollywood secrets gone deadly. In the desolate sprawl of Spahn Ranch, Charles Manson and his family watched from the shadows, their laughter a chilling counterpoint to the city's panic. The hunt was on, but the predators were slippery, their tracks obscured by chaos and cunning. The investigation began in a fog of confusion. The Tate crime scene was a maelstrom of horror. Blood splattered across white carpets, furniture overturned, the word pig glaring from the front door like a taunt. Detectives combed through the carnage, their flashlights cutting through the dark, revealing bullet casings, knife wounds, and a rope tying Sharon Tate's neck to Jay Sebring's. The LaBianca scene was no less gruesome, with death to pigs and helter-skelter scrawled on the walls, a carving fork jutting from Leno's abdomen. The LAPD initially treated the cases as separate, a fatal misstep. The Tate murders seemed tied to Hollywood's underbelly, perhaps a drug deal gone wrong, given Frykowski's rumored connections. The LaBiancas, a quiet suburban couple, pointed to a different motive, maybe a robbery or personal grudge. The similarities, bloody writings, extreme violence, were noted, but no one connected the dots. The police were chasing ghosts, their leads evaporating in the August heat. Render_generated_image_description equals a 1960s Los Angeles police station at night, illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights, with detectives hunched over desks cluttered with crime scene photos, bloody fingerprints, and maps. The atmosphere is tense, with cigarette smoke curling in the air and a sense of urgency palpable. Size equals medium, position equals center /. The city's fear was a living thing, slithering through cocktail parties and suburban homes. Locks were bolted, guard dogs prowled, and Hollywood's elite hired armed security. Rumors swirled. Was it a cult? A serial killer? A conspiracy reaching into the heart of Tinseltown? The press fanned the flames, splashing grisly details across front pages, while the LAPD floundered. Detectives interviewed Sharon Tate's neighbors, who reported hearing screams and gunshots, but no one had seen the killers. A .22 caliber revolver was missing from the Tate scene, and a bloody glove was found, but fingerprints were smudged and forensic technology in 1969 was limited. At the LaBianca home, neighbors recalled a strange car idling nearby, but descriptions were vague. The police chased drug dealers, ex-lovers, and even occult groups, but every lead crumbled. The killers had vanished, leaving only their witchy signatures to mock the investigation. Meanwhile, at Spahn Ranch, Charles Manson orchestrated his evasion with the finesse of a dark maestro. The ranch, a crumbling relic of Hollywood's Western movie days, was a perfect hideout, its dusty trails and sagging barns nestled in the Chatsworth Hills, far from prying eyes. Manson kept his family in line, their loyalty a twisted blend of love, fear, and LSD. The commune lived in a haze of drugs and sex, their days spent scavenging, singing, and listening to Manson's apocalyptic rants. He was their god, his charisma a velvet noose. Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, Tex Watson, and Leslie Van Houten moved through the ranch like disciples, their hands still stained with the blood of their victims. Linda Kasabian, the reluctant participant who had stood watch during the Tate murders, was the outlier, her eyes flickering with guilt. Manson sensed her weakness but kept her close, his gaze a warning that chilled her to the bone. Render_searched_image_description equals aerial view of Spahn Ranch in 1969, a dilapidated movie set with ramshackle buildings and dusty trails under a blazing California sun, evoking a sense of isolation and hidden menace. Size equals small, position equals right /. Manson's evasion was a masterclass in manipulation. He knew the police were clueless, the murder's randomness his shield. He forbade his followers from speaking of the crimes, weaving a narrative that their actions were the opening chords of helter-skelter, the race war that would elevate them to gods. To throw off suspicion, he kept the family mobile, sending them to scavenge in Los Angeles or hide in Death Valley's desolate Barker Ranch. He burned evidence, bloody clothes, the murder weapons, though the .22 revolver remained unaccounted for, a ticking time bomb. Manson's paranoia grew, his eyes darting to the horizon, expecting the law to close in. Yet he reveled in the chaos, his laughter echoing through the ranch as he read the newspapers, savoring the city's terror. "They'll never find us," he'd whisper, his voice a seductive purr, and his followers believed him, their devotion a fortress against the outside world. The police, however, were not entirely adrift. Detective work, though slow, began to uncover threads. A breakthrough came in September 1969, when a hiker found a .22 caliber revolver in the hills near Cielo Drive. Ballistics linked it to the Tate murders, but no fingerprints tied it to a suspect. The LAPD interviewed drug dealers and hippies, suspecting the counterculture's involvement, but the family's insular world was hard to penetrate. Spahn Ranch was known to police as a haven for drifters, but its connection to the murders was unclear. The investigation's tension mounted, each dead-end a blow to morale. Detectives worked late into the night, their desks littered with photos of bloodied bodies and cryptic messages, their dreams haunted by the faces of the dead. The city demanded justice, but the killers remained phantoms, their laughter a distant echo in the desert. The climax came in October 1969, not from police brilliance, but from a stroke of luck. The Manson family's unraveling began with a seemingly unrelated incident, a raid on Barker Ranch in Death Valley for vandalism and stolen vehicles. Manson and several followers, including Susan Atkins, were arrested, but not for murder. Locked in Sybil Brand Institute, Atkins couldn't resist bragging. She confided in a cellmate, Virginia Graham, about the Tate murders, her voice dripping with pride as she described stabbing Sharon Tate, tasting her blood, and scrawling "pig" on the door. "It felt so good," she hissed, her eyes gleaming with a twisted ecstasy. Graham, horrified, alerted authorities, and the pieces began to fall into place. Another informant, Kitty Lutzinger, a family member arrested in the same raid, revealed Manson's obsession with helter-skelter and his control over the group. The LAPD, stunned, realized the murders were not random, but the work of a cult led by a diminutive madman. Render_generated_image_description equals a tense jail cell scene in 1969, with two women whispering in the shadows, one with a wild, unsettling grin, the other visibly horrified, as dim light filters through barred windows, creating a claustrophobic atmosphere of dread. Size equals medium, position equals center /. The investigation pivoted to Spahn Ranch. Detectives descended on the commune, their boots kicking up dust as they searched for evidence. They found knives, ropes, and a culture of fear, but Manson was elusive, his followers tight-lipped. The breakthrough with Atkins' confession gave them leverage. Police re-interviewed family members, pressing Linda Kasabian, whose guilt made her vulnerable. She cracked, offering details of the Tate night in exchange for immunity, her voice trembling as she recounted the screams, the blood, the madness. The net tightened. Manson, sensing the walls closing in, fled deeper into Death Valley, but his charisma couldn't outrun fate. On October 12, 1969, he was arrested again during a second Barker Ranch raid, found hiding in a tiny bathroom cabinet, his small frame curled up like a trapped animal. The resolution was electric. The LAPD connected the dots, the .22 revolver, Atkins' confession, Kasabian's testimony, and the family's strange commune life. Charles Manson, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten were named as suspects in the Tate LaBianca murders. Los Angeles exhaled, but the relief was tinged with dread. The killers were not faceless monsters, but young people, hippies, dropouts, faces you might pass on Sunset Strip. The city's fear shifted to fascination. How could a man like Manson bend others to such evil? The investigation's success was a triumph, but the cost was steep. 7 lives lost, a city scarred, and a trial looming that would captivate the world. As Manson sat in a cell, his wild eyes unrepentant, the stage was set for a courtroom drama as twisted as the murders themselves. Los Angeles, late 1969, was a city caught in a fever dream of fear and fascination. The Tate LaBianca murders had ripped through its soul, leaving blood-soaked memories of Sharon Tate's lifeless body, the cryptic "pig" scrawled on a Hollywood mansion's door, and the LaBianca's suburban home turned slaughterhouse. The Los Angeles Police Department, after months of chasing shadows, had finally closed in on the Manson family, a cult of drifters led by the hypnotic Charles Manson. His followers, Susan Atkins, Tex Watson, Patricia Krenwinkel, Leslie Van Houten, and others, had been unmasked as the architects of the city's nightmares. As the arrests piled up, the nation watched breathless, as the stage was set for a trial that would be less a legal proceeding and more a descent into madness. Manson, with his wild eyes and serpent's charm, was ready to turn the courtroom into his final act, a spectacle that would both horrify and enthrall. The capture was a crescendo of chaos. By October 1969, the net had tightened around Spawn Ranch and Barker Ranch, the desolate hideouts where Manson's family had festered. Susan Atkins' jailhouse boasts to a cellmate about tasting Sharon Tate's blood had cracked the case wide open. Linda Kasabian, trembling with guilt, had turned informant, her vivid recounting of the Tate murders a chilling map to the family's depravity. On October 12th, Manson himself was dragged from a tiny bathroom cabinet at Barker Ranch, his small frame coiled like a cornered animal, his smirk defiant even in cuffs. Tex Watson, the family's enforcer, was nabbed in Texas, his boyish charm no match for the weight of his crimes. Krenwinkel and Van Houten were rounded up, their vacant stares betraying the hold Manson still had over them. The arrest sent shockwaves through Los Angeles, but the city's relief was laced with dread. These weren't monsters from a horror film. They were young, lost souls, warped by a man who seemed to wield the devil's own charisma. Render_generated_image_description equals a gritty 1960s jail cell, dimly lit, with Charles Manson sitting on a cot, his piercing eyes glowing in the shadows, a sly grin curling his lips as he stares directly at the viewer, exuding an unsettling mix of menace and allure. Size equals medium, position equals center /. The confessions were a twisted symphony of horror. Susan Atkins, locked in Sybil Brand Institute, couldn't stop talking. To her cellmates, she spun tales of the murders with a chilling glee, describing how she stabbed Sharon Tate, how the actress's pleas for her unborn child only fueled her frenzy. Her blood was warm, like a lover's touch, Atkins whispered, her voice a seductive venom that made listeners recoil. Linda Kasabian, granted immunity, poured out her story to prosecutors, her voice breaking as she recounted standing watch while her friends turned Salo Drive into a slaughterhouse. Her testimony was a lifeline for the prosecution, painting a vivid picture of Manson's control, his orders to do something witchy, and the family's blind obedience. Yet Manson remained silent, his silence a weapon, his eyes daring anyone to unravel his enigma. The confessions built a case, but they also fed the public's morbid curiosity, turning the Manson family into a grotesque spectacle. The trial, beginning in June 1970, was a circus of madness, a stage where Manson played the starring role. The Los Angeles Hall of Justice became a theater of the absurd, packed with reporters, gawkers, and family members who lingered outside, their shaved heads and carved foreheads, marked with an X in loyalty to Manson, a chilling testament to his enduring power. Inside, Manson was a force of nature. Dressed in fringe buckskins or tattered jailhouse blues, he swaggered into court, his 5 feet 2 inches frame radiating a dangerous charisma. His eyes, dark and unblinking, seemed to bore into jurors, witnesses, even the judge. He interrupted proceedings with cryptic rants, quoting Beatles lyrics or preaching about helter-skelter, his voice a low, hypnotic growl that sent shivers through the courtroom. "You're all pigs, and I'm your mirror," he sneered, his words a taunt that blurred the line between madness and genius. The tension in the courtroom built to a fever pitch. Manson's manipulative behavior was relentless. He orchestrated disruptions, coaching Atkins, Krenwinkel, and Van Houten to mimic his defiance. The women, their once innocent faces now hardened, giggled during testimony about the murders, their laughter a chilling echo of the crime scenes. When Prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi presented the blood-soaked evidence, knives, ropes, the .22 revolver, Manson leaped from his chair, shouting, "You're all guilty." The judge, Charles Older, struggled to maintain order as Manson's antics escalated. In one electrifying moment, he lunged at Older with a pencil, screaming, "I'll carve your name in history." Bailiffs tackled him, but his grin never faltered, as if he'd scripted the chaos. Outside, family members chanted his name, their voices a haunting chorus that seeped through the courthouse walls, amplifying the sense that Manson's reach extended beyond his chains. The prosecution's case was a masterclass in unraveling occult psyche. Bugliosi, relentless attorney with a flair for drama, wove a narrative of Manson as a Svengali, a man who turned lost hippies into killers. Kasabian's testimony was the linchpin, her tearful recounting of the Tate murders, painting Manson as the puppet master. "He told us to kill, and we did," she whispered, her voice barely audible yet deafening in its impact. Bugliosi linked the murders to Manson's helter-skelter obsession, using Beatles records and blood-scrawled messages to show his apocalyptic intent. The defense, hamstrung by Manson's insistence on controlling the narrative, faltered. When Manson demanded to represent himself, his incoherent rants about society's corruption only deepened the jury's horror. The women, too, testified in his defense, their loyalty unwavering, but their words, laced with drug-addled devotion, only damned them further. Render_generated_image_description equals a dramatic courtroom scene in 1970, with Vincent Bugliosi pointing accusingly at Charles Manson, who smirks defiantly from the defense table, while the jury watches in stunned silence, the air thick with tension and the weight of the gruesome evidence displayed on a table. Size equals medium, position equals center, /. The climax came in January 1971, as the trial neared its end. Manson, sensing defeat, escalated his theatrics. He shaved his head and carved an X into his forehead, a gesture his female followers mimicked, their scalps glistening under courtroom lights. In a chilling moment, Atkins, Krenwinkel, and Van Houten stood and sang Manson songs, their voices an eerie harmony that sent chills through the gallery. The jury, sequestered for months, was shaken but resolute. Bugliosi's closing argument was a fiery indictment, calling Manson a dictator who turned love into slaughter. The courtroom held its breath as the verdict loomed, the weight of 7 murders pressing down like a storm cloud. On January 25, 1971, the jury returned, guilty on all counts for Manson. Atkins, Krenwinkel, Van Houten, and Watson tried separately. The penalty phase was equally dramatic, with Manson railing against a doomed society as the death penalty was handed down, later commuted to life imprisonment when California abolished capital punishment in 1972. The resolution was a bittersweet triumph. Los Angeles exhaled, the killers caged, but the scars remained. Manson and his followers were sentenced to life, their names etched in infamy. Atkins, Krenwinkel, and Van Houten were sent to women's prisons, their youth swallowed by bars. Watson, stoic in his own trial, joined Manson in men's facilities, their bond unbroken by steel. Manson reveled in his notoriety, granting interviews that dripped with cryptic menace, his words a siren song for the morbidly curious. The trial had exposed the dark heart of the 1960s, a warning that even flower children could wield knives. Yet, as the gavel fell, questions lingered. How deep did Manson's influence run? Were there other crimes, other followers, still lurking in the shadows? The family's remnants still roamed, their loyalty to Manson a lingering threat. Lynette Squeaky, from A Devoted Disciple, was seen outside the courthouse, her eyes burning with unspoken plans. And here, the story pauses, its threads dangling like the ropes at Cielo Drive. What became of the Manson family survivors? Did their dark gospel fade, or did it take root elsewhere, waiting to erupt? The answers lie beyond these pages, in a tale yet untold. To uncover the chilling legacy of Manson's madness, the whispers of conspiracies, and the fates of those who escaped justice, join us for the next chapter on our channel. The shadows of Helter Skelter are far from gone, and the truth is more twisted than you dare imagine.